Thank you all for coming. Let's talk a little bit about APRS. If you don't know me, my name is Frank Watervoort, call sign AB0WV. I've been with ARESDEC since 2002, since the start of the Hayman fire. So this is my 20th year. And like I listed up here, I've been licensed since '95, but I've only been active really since I joined ARESDEC, which was in 2002. So my software, my APRS software, PinPoint, I actually started writing that in 2005 when it was still based on MapPoint. And that was a Microsoft product with maps on CDs, and internet was, internet mapping wasn't as prevalent. And then I was trying to come up with a name for the software, and Nick Hanks, N0LP, who was with the EOSS, the ballooning guys, wrote this software called TrackPoint. And that's what I wanted to call my software, TrackPoint. So I'm like, okay, all right, I'll graciously bow out. And then Perry suggested PinPoint. I'm like, that sounds really good. I'll stick with that. So it's been called PinPoint ever since. So I initially wrote it for ARESDEC for personal use and things like that. And it's gradually expanding into other uses. And it's kind of funny to see the emails I'm getting from people all over the world that, hey, we're using it for a very specific type of application. Can you help us with a specific feature? I'm like, whoa. It's really interesting to see what people are using it for. I'll get into PinPoint later. We're first going to go into APRS in general, history, things like that, and jump in with any questions or additional information. I want this to be interactive. If you know something or a funny anecdote or something, just jump in. My only objective tonight, even for the guys who know everything about APRS, is that you walk away with one thing. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay? I just want to see if I can make everybody, just learn one thing tonight. All right. So we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff. What it is, the terminology we use, the history behind it, what's new. In other words, what do you see in the news lately? What are people doing out there? By the way, if I talk a little funny, I recently got braces. I'm 56 years old, and I finally decided to get braces. So I'm still getting used to them.
We thought that was your Dutch accent.
It is. We're going to go down the rabbit hole a little bit. In other words, really down into the gnarly detail on some stuff. It's kind of funny to look at. Emergency communications use. Why do we use APRS in EMCOM? Setting up your own station. What are best practices? Things you should definitely think about when you're setting up your own. A PinPoint overview, which I'm going to do live. I don't have slides for that, so I'm going to do that live on the laptop. And then digital APRS on DMR. How does it work? More show and tell. Hopefully, I've got some stuff here I can show and tell you what it's all about, and I'll do that throughout the presentation as well. And hopefully here, some people have some stuff to show. It'd be cool. And then Q&A. All right. So what is APRS? Well, the acronym originally was Automatic Position Reporting System, and it was later changed to Automatic Packet Reporting System. And I'll tell you later why. But really, it is a method for real-time communications. So it allows people to very quickly exchange real-time data over a digital medium without having to call it in by voice and things like that. So it could be location data from a fixed station, mobile stations, digipeaters. We'll talk about what those are. iGates, weather stations, etc. Weather data itself, telemetry, for instance, stations that are fed by batteries with solar panels. It can report on the state of the battery, how many volts are there, and things like that. And you'll see a lot of this actually come across when you're watching packets scroll on your screen. And then also messaging. It includes messaging to SMS, your regular phone, email, and WinLink. And I'll show you examples of those when we do the hands-on thing. But yes, APRS has built-in reliable messaging, connected messaging, where it acknowledges back to you that it actually was received. And we'll play with that later. It uses short bursts of data over radio using a Bell 202 AFSK. What does that mean? It's just a standard for using a couple of different tones to send digital data. Remember the old modems, that you used to dial up to the internet with the screech, when some of you, I'm sure, were able to, just by listening to the modem, you could actually tell what speed it was connecting at. It kind of sounds like that, right, on the radio. So originally it's just RF over radio, but later, when the internet became more pervasive, APRS IS was added, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. The RF side is based on something that is very familiar if you are in the networking side of the business and you used to work with packet switching networks called X25. I don't know if you remember that. It was an old way of connecting, switching packets over networks to get them to their destination.
International standard for data communications when the rest of the world was IBM.
Exactly. I worked a lot with X25 when right before it actually was replaced. So the AX25, the A stands for amateur. So this is an adapted version of the packet switching network protocol. And it is connectionless. What does connectionless mean? It means the opposite is connection-oriented. What is connection-oriented? When you and I are having a conversation, you and I are having a connection-oriented conversation. I look in your eyes, I talk to you, you acknowledge what I just said, and I talk, we have a conversation. Same thing in packet, not APRS, packet. In packet, you connect to a node. The node says, oh, I heard you, you're connected, there's an acknowledgement constantly going back and forth. Connectionless means I'm broadcasting to the world. I don't care if you acknowledge. I don't care who hears me. So it's it's like after 20 years of marriage. No, no, just kidding. But connectionless meaning, nobody is required to say, oh, I heard you, unless it's about messaging, but that's later. All right. Most data transmitted has a limited shelf life. In other words, it's probably good information to have for an hour, and then its use, because if it's a mobile radio, for instance, a car that's driving around, well, if you know where somebody was half an hour ago, that's good to know, but if you get that beacon 2 hours late, then it's kind of useless because, that person's no longer in that position probably. So most of the data, including weather data, telemetry, has a limited shelf life. In other words, it's useful right then, right there, and then its usefulness starts to drop off pretty quickly. All right. We have repeaters that we call digipeaters. They work just like voice repeaters. However, they are simplex. They don't use two frequencies to communicate. It's just one frequency. Here in the US, we'll talk about that a little bit. There's more frequencies than just that. But it's 144.390. In Europe, it's 144.800. And it's store and forward. In other words, there's a computer, little modem or something like that, that takes in your packet, analyzes it, does something with it, and then pushes it back out over the same frequency to forward it to other nodes, et cetera, et cetera. So store and forward. Typical equipment and software you see in APRS, it really depends on what you're trying to do. If you buy a specific type of radio, for instance, if you buy the Anytone, the Chinese-made radio that have APRS capabilities built in, and you want to use it with PinPoint, with software, external software, it doesn't have to be my software, it can any software, sorry, not going to work. So you've got to be really clear about what you want to do with APRS. For instance, we have self-contained beacons for tracking purposes. This is a really good example. This is the Voyager from Microsat with a GPS and a battery. This is a completely self-contained beacon, but it has a receiver in it too, so it can be actually a lot of different things.
We have like 4 of those in ARES. We have 4 of them.
Dick, you said 10, right?
We bought 10, but members picked them. That's how I got mine. The one we use for our remote digipeater on the Boulder Run is one of those in a little plastic toolbox.
The one in the trailer.
There's one in the trailer, and there's 1 or 2 along with the little tiny trackers sitting in the trailer. But when we bought them, got a real good price on them. And
yeah, about 180?
Members snapped them up.
Was it 180? $180, right?
What?
Yeah, it was a little discount. Anyway, we got a bunch of them because we slap these things on the back of these poker runs, sweep riders, so we can see on the map where they are. And if they call in, we know exactly where they are, where we need to send the ambulance if there's a problem, etc. So we got a bunch of these. We also have mobile and handheld self-contained units. And again, the Anytone is a good example. The venerable Kenwood D710 and D700 for mobile use in a car are very well known. The D74 by Kenwood, which is good luck trying to find one of those. Those, by the way, just for fun, Kenwood is having trouble with chips or whatever, and they're not producing the APRS radios anymore. Not the TS2000, not the D710, not the D74. The D74 was around $500 when it was new, when you still could get them. Now, if you look on eBay, they're over 1,000 used. So, and I asked the Kenwood dealer if they're going to get back into producing these radios, and they just don't know. They have no idea. But Kenwood still advertises them on their website, so who knows? You have dedicated iGates and digipeater units. So this is a good example here. This is a Raspberry Pi right here running Direwolf. And Direwolf is a fantastic piece of software that, combined with a radio and a sound modem, like a Signal Link or anything like that, which I'll talk more about later, can make a complete digipeater or iGate. We'll talk about iGate and digipeater in a little bit, but if you are trying to service a certain area or something like that, that's a great piece of hardware. Just a Raspberry Pi, which also, by the way, trying to find one of those. That's crazy. And then there's full mapping and applications type of software, internet support, things like that, where you want to get, and I'll show some examples of this, like PinPoint, where you have a radio, a TNC, and a piece of software. So you can do all kinds of mapping and messaging right there from the convenience of your computer. And there's a bunch of those. You can do browser only, like that's APRS.fi, written by Heikki Heinikainen. He's in Finland, lives in Helsinki. And then there's APRSdirect.de, and they're kind of competing for the same thing. But these are online-only websites. They use the APRS IS server system, which I'll talk more about. You have standalone PC applications. PinPoint is a standalone. Why is it standalone? Because it needs to work under any circumstance. When there's no internet, when you're providing your own power, and when all you have is radio, it needs to work. So completely standalone. Mobile apps, APRS Droid, APRS.fi has its own mobile app for iOS, which is quite good. And then there's also Pocket Packet for mobile apps. I'll share the, by the way, don't worry about taking notes. I'll share the whole presentation with everybody later. So. And then soft TNCs. In other words, if you don't want to invest in a fairly limited hardware modem, we'll talk more about what these things do in a little bit. You can also use software to do it with, and then use a sound card interface, like a sound modem or Direwolf together with a Signal Link or Rig Blaster or anything like that. So there's all kinds of, the only point I'm trying to get across is there's all kinds of options, and it really depends on what you're trying to do that will determine the best choice. All right, so what does it look like? What do these things look like? Well, here's a great example of a new Pico APRS unit that has just come out. Looks really, really cool. I think this is still the prototype, the 3D printed prototype. But this is a fully functional APRS unit. See how small that thing is? It has mapping built in. It has a complete KISS TNC built in. We'll talk about KISS, keep it simple, stupid, in a little bit. But this is one example. What is this useful for? Probably not much more than beaconing. This is probably, in my mind, useful for beaconing if you're on the road and not much else. But it looks cool. There's the APRS Voyager for Microsat, for instance, which is the unit that I just showed you from Poland. It's just a great little unit. Has built-in modem, has completely self-contained. Hook up a GPS and a battery and you're all ready to go. The D710 from Kenwood. Look at the path. That's interesting, right? It's via the International Space Station, the Russian side of it. So this is one of the better APRS radios for either home use or in your car, because especially the G unit, which this is not, has a built-in GPS. You can get a separate GPS for it. But this is a great little radio.
Do you know where you can get separate ones anymore? The company I have doesn't make them anymore.
They don't make them anymore?
No.
Okay. They're not hard to build.
Because
They're not hard.
Wayne's been trying to find something for his setup.
Okay. They're not hard to build, so.
Not really.
But yeah, I don't know if they, yeah, most of the production has gone over to the G. Now you can't find them at all, but with the built-in GPS. But
HRO bought the last of Kenwood's stock on D710s and raised the price from 500 to 750. If they still have any available.
yeah, yeah. They're great radios, though. And good luck trying to find them used because Direwolf is just a Raspberry Pi with a screen. It's a fully super powerful APRS application. It doesn't do any mapping, but it does everything else. It's a really, really cool piece of software. This is the MobileLinked. You can actually build your own Arduino TNC on the MobileLinked website. This link right here takes you to a homebrew project where you can build your own TNC that works exactly like the MobileLinked unit. The MobileLinked unit this is basically the TNC right here that I've got, and with my little my first handheld transceiver ever, which I still have, and it works great. You can just basically Velcro this to the back and use this over Bluetooth with your phone, and you have a complete APRS setup. And these are pretty nice, but they're also completely sold out. What's that?
I'm sensing a trend here.
Yeah, no kidding. Chip shortage? No, anyone? This is the D74 by Kenwood. I really wanted to get my hands on one of these, and then they were all gone. You've got one? That's really cool. I hope that they start making them again.
I bought the second one, sold at HRO.
Oh, nice.
Somebody beat me to the first one.
Very nice. Very nice. Great radio. Very APRS capable. It can do anything on APRS, which these, the Anytones, can't. They're very basic in their implementation of APRS, the Anytones. The software side, what does it look like? Well, this is probably the first known APRS software that was out there. It was written by Bob Bruninga, WB4APR, who was actually the original developer and the person who the godfather or the father of APRS, basically. And this was APRS DOS, so you can see not much going on in terms of mapping. You can barely recognize there's something going on. Okay, we're on the East Coast here somewhere, Baltimore, yes. And you can see, very basic depiction of stations received, etc. So this is very, very early on. This is APRS.fi. It's the website. I'm sure most of you have played with this. Really, really well done. In fact, the person who wrote this is very involved in the whole internet backbone side of APRS, and has done a lot of work to promote it, but also to write software for it. APRS Direct, which is basically the competitor of APRS.fi, also online only, so it runs in a web browser. Then the venerable UI view, developed by a gentleman in the UK who unfortunately passed away 10 years ago? I don't even know, something like that. And so development stopped on it, but you'd be surprised how many people still use his software. And
Did his daughter make the code, the source code available? Because the original, I can't remember his name anymore, but the original, he didn't want the development to die with it.
it was G4 something or other. Yeah,
Brit.
yeah. And I don't know, Perry. It's possible that it became open source, but I haven't. Yeah, I know that there's a lot of plugins for it.
It was so far past. I mean, I went from UI view to PinPoint and didn't look back.
Yeah, yeah. It's great piece of software, very powerful. I actually looked at UI view to figure out how I should do certain things in PinPoint, like great artist steal. What is it? Something like that.
Inspiration.
Something like that. Then there's APRS ISCE, which I've never used myself, but it's another client out there. It looks a little, I don't know, I just don't like the look and feel that much, but people do use it, and it has mapping built in as well, as you can tell. And then of course there's PinPoint, which is the software I write. And one of my objectives is to make it stupid simple to use. And you know, because a lot of software out there has been, I'm in software, so this may not mean anything to you, but a lot of software looks like it has been developed by back-end developers, meaning they have no idea how a UI should look, you know, and don't know about user experiences and things like that. I don't claim to know about user experiences, but I know a little bit about it, and you know, I try to make sure that it is easy to use. That is my objective.
So basically, all these do the same things, just how they do it is what you're saying?
Yes, very true. And of course, there's some overlap in terms of maybe this software does one or two things that this software doesn't do, but it does a couple of other things. And you know, in all fairness, PinPoint is probably very basic compared to some of these things, because I'm trying to focus doing a great job on the stuff that most people use. So we got a bunch of frequencies in the USA here that people use APRS, and of course the primary frequency being 144.390, 1200 bits per second. There's another frequency, .340, which we kind of look at as an event or backup frequency. So if we're running Poker Run, for instance, in the mountains, and we've got lots of people beaconing, and they're beaconing every minute, you know, one of the things, as you can imagine, that we try to prevent is to saturate the network, because it's only one frequency that we're using with the whole front range, right? Including all the digipeaters that are repeating data and all that stuff.
Weather stations every 30
Weather
seconds.
stations, etc. So, and then W0ARP, who's in my window every 30 seconds. No, just kidding.
Weather stations every 30 seconds.
So, what we do is we actually, during an event like that, we basically tune to a different frequency for APRS, use the backup frequency 340, and then we take all that traffic off the main network, because it's really just to benefit us, right? That traffic, not for everybody else. UHF is out there. People definitely beacon on UHF. It really varies. There are standards in certain areas where some, people use digipeaters or iGates on certain frequencies, and then the frequency is different in another part of the country, so we don't really have a standard. There's 30 meters and 60 meters, which was really interesting. I don't know how many people use that. I certainly don't. And I also see some people starting to use VARA, and I'll talk about that a little bit. And then the frequency in Europe and Africa is 144.800. So what is APRS IS? So IS stands for Internet Service. It's a two-tiered network of internet-connected redundant servers that basically collect APRS information from all these radio stations that iGate, in other words, transport that data to their servers. So they receive it via the antenna, use a piece of software like Direwolf, and send it on to these servers. And these servers collect it all, and then whoever wants to use it for mapping or anything like that, all they have to do is connect to one of these servers, and you get a fire hose of data depending on how you set up your filters and things like that. So we'll talk about that a little bit when I do the PinPoint overview. So all servers exchange APRS data with other servers. So there's a huge amount of redundancy. So doesn't matter what server you connect to, they all have the same data. And all clients can send filter commands when connecting. What does that mean? When I connect to one of these servers, I got to first of all tell it where I am. What is my position? And then I tell it I want to receive everything within a circle of, say, 50 miles. And it's only going to send me that information. If I mistype and say 1,000 miles, it's going to send me all that information. And your client may run a little slow because it's getting a fire hose of data. So, and that works, I tried it. You need an APRS passcode when you're sending data into the network. So when you are iGating, when you are taking information that you received on your antenna and you're passing it to those servers they want to see your passcode. They want to make sure you're legit, that you actually have an amateur radio call sign, all that stuff. When you're reading, when you're receiving only, and you're not contributing to the network, you don't need it. They're happy to give the data to anybody who connects to the server. So get your passcode at that link over there. If you don't have one, it's based on your call sign only. It's not including your SSID. In other words, your -9 or your -1 or something like that, just your call sign. There's no central database. It is a simple math formula. In fact, we're going to do that by hand. Don't connect to the service directly. Use, for instance, here in North America, we use NOAM, NorthAmerica.APRS2.net, or rotate.APRS2.net. Don't type in the service directly. Why? Well, it's kind of a round robin thing. So if one of these servers fails, it immediately gets dropped out of this definition. In other words, you're not going to get connected to it. So this is kind of a nice way of load balancing the load, like, oh, we're going to send you to this server. They've got more than enough connections.
Do you know where that's hosted? Is that AWS or where do they host that?
All over the place. It's literally, it's geographically all over the place too. And I'll show you in a diagram here in a second. So this is kind of an overview of what APRS IS does. So here you have your moving object. It's broadcasting APRS. It gets picked up by a digipeater or not. It can also go directly to an iGate. But it gets picked up by a digipeater. The digipeater sends it back out. And then the iGate, which is this whole setup, receives it. And it sees you moving down the street. And it sends it to the APRS servers. And the APRS servers send it all to each other. And so that they're all in sync all the time. So another iGate may actually read this information and rebroadcast it. So that in another area where your RF didn't make it, you can still pick up the beacon packet because it went through the internet. It may have gone around the world a couple of times and then come back out on RF frequencies. Or, in the case of APRS FI, that website, that's what APRS FI, it just reads directly from these servers and sees you moving down the street. So if you type in APRS FI and you type in my call sign, you'll see that I drove here and that my car is parked right there. Or if you have an app on your phone, on your smartphone, they also talk to these servers and get their information from there. There are apps that actually connect directly to the radio. For instance, Pocket Packet allows you, if you have a cable or a Bluetooth setup, audio setup, you can actually connect to a radio directly. But most apps will allow you to connect to the internet only, so APRS IS. So this is really at the very center of that whole infrastructure.
Hey Frank,
Yes?
I'm curious about the path where the packet goes into the APRS network, but then comes back out through an iGate and gets rebroadcast.
Yep.
I mean, theoretically, that seems to me that, we don't need anybody, we don't need London packets being rebroadcast here.
Only within a certain geographic area.
Okay.
I don't know what the accepted limit is for that, but within the same geographic area, you'll see this happening. But you're right. I'm not going to take, packets from me driving on the road here, and they don't get RF sent out to London because you would saturate the network completely.
APRS FI, I can look and see though, right?
You can see anything around the world,
Yeah.
anywhere. So yeah.
Messages are handled differently though, right?
There's a lot of messages are actually handled the same way, but there's an acknowledgement coming back if you send a message, and there is actually, including in PinPoint, there's deduping logic. When there's a certain packet coming in, it's going to stick its fingers in its ear for 30 seconds if it hears the same packet from another path.
Okay.
And not report on it again and again and again and again, and iGate it again and again and again. So there's deduping logic in there for 30 seconds, a rolling window, where it says, if I hear that packet again, I'm just going to throw it out.
Okay.
So just forget what you just saw, because this is how it really works. No, what I'm trying to say is that it is not just a bunch of servers connected. There's actually a whole tiering structure here. So there's, the core servers, and then there's a whole hub system, and they feed all these servers that are all literally all over the world. And this is where you see NOAM, North America. So if you type in your connecting to your server, you type in noam.aprs2.net, you will get one of these servers in North America that you're talking to. And that looks like this. There's actually, T2 leaves, there's 83 servers that actually serve up all that traffic. And if you go to, and the links are in here too, I'll show you how to see this. You can actually scroll down and see all these servers, and then click on these servers to see what are they doing, how many people are connected, how many people are iGating. It's really cool. In PinPoint, you can do the same thing. You can actually, when you're clicking on, and I'll show you this, when you're connecting to APRS IS, it says at the very bottom, it says APRS IS connected, and then there's a link. And you can click on the link, and it will bring up the server you're on. And you can find your own call sign. So these are the links for what I was just showing. Again, I'll post this in Slack, and you can read it at your leisure. Terminology, AX25 protocol. We talked about that already. I don't need to go any deeper. It's the amateur radio version of the X25 protocol. APRS IS is the internet service. The APRS passcode is the password you need in order for you to write to the servers. If you're just reading, you don't need it. The Bell 202 AFSK modem standard for VHF is the 1200 baud tone system that the packet modem uses for communication. So it turns the digital bits into audio. That's what that's about. A digipeater, a digi, we talked about that. What does it do? It receives data, then looks at the packet, then modifies something, and we'll talk about path here in a second. Modifies something, and then sends it back out. Or maybe it doesn't send it back out, because it saw that it was the last hop. So we'll talk about path, what determines that here in a minute. Generic digipeating. Who here has worked with packet? So when you connect to a packet station, you can connect via another station, right? So to go a hop via another station to your destination is where you basically set your destination address as the machine that you want to connect to, and you set the path that you're connecting via. In other words, how the hop you're making to get to your destination. In APRS, we don't do that. We do generic digipeating. That means that there is a bunch of digipeaters out there that are basically using the same call sign. Is it a call sign? No, it's not really a call sign. But it's called wide something. And it basically acts like a call sign. So when I say I want to beacon my path, I want to beacon my packet via wide 1.1, I'll show you in a minute here how that really works. What I'm saying is that I hope there's somebody out there listening who has as call sign path wide 1. And then they pick it up like, oh yeah, I'm a wide 1, and I will send on the packet. And I'll show you in a second how that goes.
So what's wide 2 then and wide 3?
I have another whole slide for it. So, and then you have fill-in digis. So if you are at a poker run and we need people to help digipeating those packets so that they get to the people who are organizing the race, the people out there with these little trackers on their back, that packet may not make it back to the race organizer. So there may be a digipeater needed. So if you have a D710 or you've got a Dire Wolf setup or another radio, you can actually get it to be a digipeater. So it's kind of a temporary digipeater. That's what we call a fill-in digi. It's just like a temporary digipeater that can help with getting packets broadcast out into the world where they need to go. So it's called fill-in digi.
So we should only be using wide 1-1 on those?
I'll show you what that, yeah, for fill-in digis, it's always wide 1-1.
You just want it to live one hop.
You just want it to live one hop, and we'll talk about these hops here in a second.
We, during poker run, we ask every station who is APRS capable of the digi, because we don't know where the sweep, where the packet transmitted by a sweep might be picked up by one of our checkpoints. So we use fill-in digi all the time during poker run tournaments.
Yep. iGate is a station that receives information via radio, sends it on to APRS IS. Some of them do it the other way around too. They take it out of APRS IS. They're like, oh, this is within 10 miles or whatever the distance is. I should rebroadcast this. And they have a filter set up to only get those packets that are in that circle around their station. And they rebroadcast it via RF. That's what an iGate is. So a receive-only iGate, which is what PinPoint is, only takes RF data and sends it to APRS IS. PinPoint does not go the other way. In the future, maybe, but now, right now, it does not.
So it only sends to the internet.
Only sends to the internet.
So when
TNs
we're using the poker run, it's not sending anything out, it's just receiving and resending.
Usually the poker run, we don't even have internet, so we don't even connect to APRS IS. So we are only using RF. Sorry, what?
I was going to say, we're only receiving local.
Yeah, exactly. So we're only dealing with the local RF network. We're not even dealing with any internet, because most of the time we don't even have internet connectivity. And if we do, great, but we're usually on the separate network, so on the 340 network. So it's kind of debatable if you want to send all that stuff to APRS IS too. So terminal node controller. Remember the modem is used for dial-up? Well, that's what it is. That's really what it is. That's all it is. Radios with built-in TNCs. I talked about the Kenwoods, the Anytones. Some of the Anytones, the 878 have APRS transmit only. The version 2 has receive only. Very limited implementation. It only shows it the information on your display, and then there's a list where you can go back and look at it later. That's it. That's all you can do.
What's the plus though, isn't there, the V23 or?
That's the 578, you mean?
Yeah, with the V3.
Yeah, that one is also receive,
Same.
send and receive. But it has the same implementation. It just lists, just shows you what it was received. That's it. As far as I know, you can't even send a message with it. So it's very, very limited. When these Anytones first came out, I tried beaconing on IPRS, and it didn't work. My software did not receive it. I'm like, is there a bug in my software? And I started pulling apart what the radio was actually sending. They had they implemented it completely wrong. So I actually found the guy who was the US representative for Anytone, and he put me in contact with the factory, and they implemented it to the right spec, and then it started working. So
One of the upgrades, huh?
yes. So yeah, they had to make a few firmware changes. So the Voyager, I already showed it. Very versatile. It can do lots of stuff. It's not cheap, $200. And then Bionics MicroTrack. I don't have a MicroTrack. We use those for the poker run. I have a Bionics Tiny Track, which is basically another TNC. Very nice little unit. Bionics makes great little trackers. Wonderful stuff.
Does that do the same thing as the other one?
This does not have the RF stuff. So the trackers we have from Bionics are basically this plus a transmitter.
That doesn't transmit.
It's just a TNC. The problem with the Bionics trackers is they don't listen, so they step on other transmissions.
Right.
Whereas the Voyager listens. So that's always the thing, right? I mean, when you send something out, you listen first before you transmit. Well, all of these units do that, except for that Bionics tracker that we use for the poker run. It only has a transmitter. It has no receiver. So it's like, okay, it's time to transmit. I hope I didn't step on anybody. So that's why we always program them with every 57 seconds, every 63 seconds, so that sometimes they step on each other, but then next time they wouldn't, so. SSID, secondary station identifier. If you see a call sign dash something, the dash something is your secondary station identifier. Your home station should always be -0 or nothing, just your call sign. If it's a mobile unit, it's usually -9 or -7 for handhelds. This is not hard and fast. These are not, oh, I break the rules, I get fined or something like that. No, this is kind of a generally, acceptable standard that people use. iGates are usually -10, and then you can use 0 through 15 on RF. And then if you connect to APRS IS, you'll suddenly see stations that have a -D. Like, where does that come from? That's only on APRS IS. The APRS protocol spec does not support alphanumeric characters. So if you see a -alphanumeric character, that's only on APRS IS. It will never be sent, what's that?
Alpha,
Yeah,
not numeric.
sorry, you're right. If you see alphanumeric characters, then they are only on APRS IS, and they will not get rebroadcasted onto RF. NMEA,
By the way, Frank, about SSIDs, we also, within our group, try and restrict which SSIDs we use. So don't just generally pick anything you have. And why might that be? Well, I'm one of the weather mission controllers, so we have severe weather going on there. I'm the guy you're talking to on the radio. And I'm looking at everybody on all the storm chasers and all the spotters and everybody else on that APRS map. And I try and filter out all the weather stations, all of the buses, all of the long-haul truckers, which are all using different SSIDs. There's kind of a semi-official standard for the suffixes that we use there. And -9 or -10 or -11, I think, are 3 of the 4 or 5 that we recommend. So that when I filter that down, I've got at least a radar display with an overlay of APRS on it that I can actually read through the clutter. So it's kind of important if we follow that standard internally.
Yep, no, absolutely.
That's generally task on.
PinPoint doesn't allow a -0.
That's why you put in nothing. Yep. It's the same. -0 is the same as nothing. Some software allow you to do it. Others, when you put in -0, it actually means nothing. I actually have the code, when you put in -0, it actually strips it off again.
Yep.
So I do that on purpose. Yeah.
So what about these stations that they are using as a call sign, really a tactical?
Yeah, you can do that. That's a great question. For instance, Peaceful Valley does this. PVL-1 or PVLY, yeah. And then you see that as the call sign. And that is perfectly allowed as long as somewhere in the comments, in the text of the packet, the actual call sign is mentioned. The FCC doesn't care whether it's in the call sign field or if it's in the comments, as long as there's an identification in the packet that shows what the actual call sign is, that's okay. You can use tactical call signs. You're limited to like 6 or 7 characters, but and I'll show you in PinPoint how you can get around that. But yeah, it's totally allowed, which actually gets into the legality of APRS over DMR. So we'll talk about that later too. All right, NMEA. I probably have to speed up a little bit. This is a fully functional GPS right here. This is a similar GPS. It has a full display, but these things put out the same data. And NMEA data is what PinPoint can read to determine where you are. So if you get a GPS, make sure it puts out NMEA data over serial.
So that would work with a D710?
This would work with a D710. This would work with a D710. You just have to make a plug for it.
Maybe it's 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's very simple. I've got one of these little GPSs in a little battery holder stuck to the back of my D710 control head. Worked great.
Good.
Costs $20 in total.
You'll wait.
Voice alert. Voice alert's interesting. What happens with voice alert is that people sometimes they want to be able to figure out if somebody is close to them without looking at the display. So what you can do is what you do is you set your 144.390 on your radio to use a 100 hertz tone. And digipeaters don't send, they don't get that tone, of course, but they don't send that back out like a voice repeater would or something like that. So what happens is you set your radio to only open up if it hears the 100 hertz tone. So when you hear a packet, you know that the person's close by. So what you can do is you can pick up the microphone, you can literally talk to them for 2 seconds and say your call sign and then say, hey, meet me on this frequency, and then get off. That's allowed. That's voice alert. So if you're trying to talk to somebody, and because you typically hear a lot of packets, and a lot of them will be from digipeaters. But if you set your radio to 100 hertz tone to only up when it hears a 100 hertz tone, anybody who beacons with voice alert will open up your radio and you'll hear it. So,
Or if they're really close, they blow through the.
yeah,
They're on top of the
then they're probably behind you, or they're desensing you then. But you know what I mean. Yeah,
10,000 foot.
exactly.
towers here.
And they're putting out a kilowatt or something. I don't know. CWOP, Citizens Weather Observer Program. This is used on APRS IS a lot, but it's also an regular APRS, where people are beaconing their weather station information all the time. And that is used for, I don't know what it's used for. Do you know what it's actually used for?
Somebody's collecting it.
Somebody's collecting it. So, but it's great. You can see,
Cool.
it's kind of cool, yeah.
You're in the middle of a winter storm at home and you're wondering what the weather is over in King Carroll Valley.
Yeah,
You can go and click on a station there and
you can
what
see
the
it,
temperature is,
real
wind
time.
speed, and
It's real time.
I
Yep.
only push up to CWAP, and it's not RF. It's just strictly over
Yep.
the internet, but
Yep.
it does show up on APRS IS.
Yep.
RFI.
Exactly. So who invented it? Well, it was Bob Bruninga, who unfortunately went silent key this year. And I don't know who is taking hold of the APRS empire. I have no idea, but I'm sure something will come out. But he started writing, wasn't really APRS back then, but it's basically its ancestor in 1982 to map Navy ship reports. And he was a senior research engineer at the Naval Academy for 20 years. And then he initially called it CETS, Connectionless Emergency Traffic System, on a VIC-20 and a Commodore 64. And then it went to the IBM PC, and then it became APRS. And it started out as a position reporting system, and because many features were added later, they wanted to take the emphasis on position reporting off and called it packet reporting, because it's so much more than just position reporting. Weather, telemetry, messaging, etc., etc. And like I said, Bruninga became a silent key in February of 2022. He was really nice to me. I have a couple of email exchanges with him. I asked for a version moniker, which I'll show to you in a minute here, for PinPoint. He was kind of managing that database, and he gave one to me, so it was really nice. So what's new? What's the new and the latest thing in the world of APRS? Well, this is specifically in Austria. I got a few emails from guys in Austria that are trying to get PinPoint to work with Vera. And I asked them what they're using it for, and they're actually using it to broadcast on 30 and 60 meters on HF. They're actually using Vera to broadcast their position reports on HF. So I thought that was interesting, and they got it to work, and pretty cool. I'd like to experiment with that myself one of these days, but there's a few more things in here that I want to experiment with, so I don't see how I'm going to have enough time to do that.
That would be nice for ships, right?
Yeah, it's faster, right, than the 300 bots that normally is associated with that. So, the other thing that's new is that Kenwood seems to no longer be producing the APRS capable transceivers, and they had the nicest ones, the best ones that had the most features, and they were probably hit by the chip shortage, and of course constantly competing with Chinese radio manufacturers, which sorry, I love my Anytone, but not for APRS. It's great for beaconing, but.
I heard there was a factory that burned down that was making the chips that Kenwood was using.
It's possible.
It's my hope that, and I think it's one of the reasons why they yes, with the chip shortage, basically was the straw that broke the camel's back. But Kenwood's looking at the landscape and they're seeing all of these SDR-based transceivers, and they've got a component-heavy radio
Yep.
in a D710 and
Yep.
in the D700 or even the TS2000.
But they must know that they have the best implementation on
I'm sure they
APRS.
do. So my hope is what's on the design board is an SDR-based transceiver, APRS capable, that carries forward all of the software that they've developed.
I would love that. I would love that.
Does ICOM have any of their radios?
Not ICOM, but Yaesu does. Yaesu is actually expanding their APRS capable radio, so they have the 200, the 300, and the 400 now that are all APRS capable. They are self-contained units, and they're pretty good at doing APRS. However, if you want to talk to it with a piece of software like you can with the Kenwoods, because you can actually access the TNC, you can't. You can only read from it. You can't send anything into the radio. And by the way, they use a non-standard implementation. Somebody asked me if I could make PinPoint work with his Yaesu radio. I said, I don't have a Yaesu radio. So I asked him to capture a bunch of data from his radio and then send it to me. And I was like, oh, this is a non-standard implementation. So I actually have now an option in the TNC drop-down in PinPoint where you can select a Yaesu radio, and it will actually interpret the packet that is sent to the software differently. Because I don't know what Yaesu is doing, but that's why not send the standard APRS packet?
Thank you, Frank. of the
They
Yaesu
want it to
owner.
work with the
And I've already talked about Anytone that has a very, very basic implementation. So this is kind of cool. APRS on long range, and using the 433 and 900 megahertz ISM bands, 100 to 200 milliwatts output. You can buy these units for about $50, $40 or so. It's all open source. You can just download the firmware, and you're like, why would I be broadcasting APRS on 433 megahertz? Well, literally the guy in the video said, because you can. You have no infrastructure to rely on. There's no iGates. There's nothing out there that supports this. You have to provide your own iGate if you are tracking your own devices. But it completely works. And very experimental. And this board...
900 megahertz is only giving you a quarter to half a mile.
Yeah, but it is interesting. So, so another thing I definitely want to play with. I don't know if have any applications for it.
Could be used as a commercial application for races, where you're only 5 square miles, 10 square miles anyway.
Yeah, yeah, and it's basically a
No license, no call sign.
it's a GPS with a transceiver, and then an Arduino, and an little OLED display. That's all it is.
You're already hacking packets from your Davis weather station on 430.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, I thought it was interesting. Let's go down the rabbit hole a little bit. This is the AX25 frame, which I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this is basically what everything is based on in APRS. So, anatomy of an APRS packet. What's interesting is that this is how a packet looks when it's received over APRS IS. Look at this, APIN 20. That is actually something that determines what software you are using. And in this particular case, it's PinPoint 2.0. And that's what Bob Bruninger gave me. That's that moniker I was talking about when I asked him for something that helps identify PinPoint. So you see this in most regular APRS packets. If you are using compressed APRS, where you're using really short packets, that information is actually replaced with position information. So it isn't always the same thing. This is the character right here. So this is the originating call sign. This is the path, and it assumes that the first thing in the path is the version of the software. This is the path. You can see TCP/IP. That means it's APRS IS. And then there's always a colon here, and this is the character what determines what kind of APRS packet is it. A weather station, a position report, a message, and that's what that determines. And in this particular, it's a position report because here are my coordinates, and here is my comment. Another one right here. Where is the one that I...
There's Gary's.
Yeah, exactly. Here's Gary's with the -D. So that is a alphanumeric SSID only on APRS IS. And this is also a position report. It's just a regular position report. And then he's got some comments here that where he's listening, etc. There's Peaceful Valley. APMI 04, I don't know what it stands for. There's a database, I can just look it up. It's probably some kind of self-contained. Do you know what it is, Jim?
It's one of the radios.
Okay. And then path again, and then there's a different position report. This is actually a position report with timestamp. So this is the timestamp, there's the position. And then there's a little bit of telemetry in there. See that? Telemetry. So this can mean anything. The T means that this is telemetry packet, and these things are only known by the software. They're determined by the software. Could be battery voltage, could be all kinds of stuff.
Storm gauge.
Yeah, storm gauge, etc., etc. Here's a weather packet, and actually a weather packet is, see that underscore? That's a weather packet, and there's all kinds of weather information in here. This is probably rain. There's probably wind information in here. I don't know it off the top of my head anymore, but PinPoint does decode it. It actually lists what all these things are. This is a MIC-E position. This is compressed. So you see a bunch of nonsense characters in here that actually contain the position together with this. That is actually what a D700 would put out. Here's Wayne, W0ARP-3. Here's the colon after the colon. This is a message packet. Status packet, etc., etc. So lots of different packets. Wanted to show you how you can actually recognize these. Here's that destination address that I was talking about. If you want to look up what all these different versions of hardware and software are in that first thing, that first column or the first that first field in the path, go to this web address and you can download this whole list, and you can see all these applications that have these monikers. So, and minus APIN and then followed by a version number.
So it's 20 years? Is that what that 20 was? Years?
Minus 20, so that's 2.0. Does your TNC speak KISS or TNC2? So there's a couple different kind of implementations. KISS TNC, keep it simple, stupid. And these TNCs are stupid because they can't do anything but transmit or receive and send and pass it on to the radio or to the RF side. That's
Like the
it.
KPC3s.
The KPC3 is actually a smart TNC because it can do both.
Yeah, but when it's doing this, does it go to KISS mode, it seems like?
You don't have to, because if it's not in KISS mode, you can just select the KPC3 from the drop-down menu and it'll talk to it. You can actually use it for digying and everything. So it has no built-in intelligence. So it has no packet mailbox, for instance, if you use packet a lot. And it can't digipede on its own. All it is it just converts one signal to another and back. That's really all it does. And the TNC2 ones, it has a command set. You can talk to the modem and set certain parameters, and it can actually do things on its own, like digipeding, for instance, without needing your PC. And it can do a lot of stuff on its own. Has built-in intelligence. There's not 100% standard, so the problem is that what is the PK232 has a little slightly different dialect in TNC2 dialect than, for instance, the KPC3, and that is a little bit different from the Kenwood D700. And so you gotta know your commands when you start working with these TNCs. All right, what is the MCOM use? Sorry, looking at the time here. Obviously, situational awareness. So if Dick, the EC, has to constantly say, "Where are you?" and you have to say, "Well, I'm on the corner of," it gets repetitive. You start using frequencies for stuff that is just, not very useful. So it's really nice to have a map for an EC where he can see all of his resources deployed, and it gets updated real time. And it's even nicer if we can overlay it with weather, which I'm working on. I actually found some additional resources to put some, what's the university again, where they put out the NextRad stuff, the University of Iowa? Or no?
It's one of them, Iowa, Des Moines.
Anyway, So they provide this data mapping information for free. So I'm working on actually overlaying weather radar on PinPoint, so you can actually see like, oh guys, there's a big storm, hailstorm coming for you. You better move out of the way, which we've had to say more than once.
Level 2?
Level 2. Yeah. So I'm working on that, but I don't know when that's going to be ready.
Use CalTopo. There is an APRS layer in there. You can bring up call signs, and there's also a layer you can add.
Yeah. Yep. Was it GR level 2 that has, no, which is the app you were using that had
You're level 3. So
level 3? That's right.
we're talking level 2 weather service radar versus level 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, offload busy voice channels, weather overlay, messaging via APRS, WinLink, SMS, and email. So in a pinch, if you have no cell phone coverage, you can still send an SMS. And I'll show you how to do that.
It's great having hams on wildfires. A lot of my contacts are wildfires.
Yep.
Are on APRS, and we've used it when we have when they're going off on 4 or 5 hour missions.
Yeah, during Hayman Fire, we had people riding on fire trucks, right? So, sending a message from WinLink to APRS is pretty simple. It does involve a couple of steps. It's not as simple as just typing in the message and hit send. There's a couple because WinLink allows for much longer messages than in APRS. APRS packets are relatively small, so it has to break stuff up. And so there's a good video there that actually shows you on a Yeso radio how you do it. But I can actually show you real time. Hopefully I have enough time here. What you need to do is you need to first of all, make sure that you have your WinLink application running and you actually send and receive messages with it. So you have an WinLink account in good standing. So you have an active WinLink account. Then also you need to have been beaconing your position because the WinLink gateway, because there is something on the APRS network that listens for WinLink packets, it is actually when it gets a packet from you that you want to send a WinLink message, it's going to try and figure out who you are. And it's going to look for beacon packages to see where you are. So if you haven't beaconed for a while and you're trying to send a WinLink packet, it's not going to do it. So you got to beacon for a while.
That means more than once, right?
Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, I'm assuming once is enough, but turn your beaconing on. So sometimes it will send you back a prompt to log in. And that's when you want to go to this reference because that's because you have to share your APRS password, your WinLink password over RF frequencies. And they have a clever way to disguise it. So that's where you want to go look at this reference over here, how you do that. And what they basically do is they send you a number, they say log in, and then they say 856. So what they want to hear from you is the 8th, the 5th, and the 6th letter of your password, and then you can put any letters in between you want for a total of 6 letters or numbers, depending on what's in your password. So that somebody looking at this packet goes, I don't know which one is the real ones. And you can mix them up. And it's not that you have to do it in that order. As long as they're in that packet, you're good.
So it's always going to ask for that every time you do that?
It does that once every so many hours. After a while, it just forgets about you and you have to do it again. But it does, when it prompts you, it'll remember you.
So you have to go there to get that password?
It's your WinLink password, not your passcode. It's not your passcode, it's your WinLink password.
Okay.
And you want to write it down and then put numbers under it. The first letter, second letter, third letter, fourth letter. So that when you get a login message and it says 873, that you're like, okay, the 8th character is this, the 7th character is this, the 3rd character is this. And you can mix them up in the response.
Except for those 3.
And then you can add 3 more garbage letters anywhere you want. So, pretty clever. So to send a message in your APRS client, you basically address it to WLNK-1. That is the destination call sign. And there's a bunch of iGates listening for that. You can do this over IPRS IS as well. You don't have to be connected via radio. the first message should be SP, then the destination call sign of the person you're actually trying to read on the WinLink network, and then the subject. Example is SP AB0WV, test message from APRS.
SP is send private from packet. It is.
Yep. So then it's going to say message acknowledged back to you. And then you send a second message, and that can be anything you want. So it's still sent to WLNK-1, and then you type anything you want. And you can add a third and a fourth message to be included, and the WinLink gateway will actually add those lines to its message. Then when you're ready to send it, you send just /EX.
End of file.
End of file, and it sends the message to the WinLink recipient. It works. I used it with Gary, and he got it. So.
I don't know if you're going to mention this, but if in your APRS status message that you're beaconing, if you include the WLNK-1,
Yep. If you put WinLink into your comment, it actually the gateway will pick up on that, and you just put it in your comment. So not in your destination address or anything like that, just in the comment. What will happen is that the WinLink gate will send a message to you like this when you have received a WinLink message. And yes, you can read it via APRS. It's cumbersome, but you can. It's better just to fire up your WinLink client.
It's kind of cool on my old D700, if I'm driving around and I have the WLNK-1 in my comment string, all of a sudden the radio goes diddle-diddle-diddle-diddle, letting you know that you've received a notification and you have a WinLink message waiting.
Yep.
So, then when you get home, you can connect to WinLink, your preferred methodology, and retrieve your message.
Yep. Yep.
You just put that in the comments section.
Yeah, just in the comments section. That's all you need to do. Sending an SMS to a mobile phone is really easy. You basically send it to SMSGTE, that is the destination call sign, and then you start the message with the phone number with @ sign and then the phone number, and then you just say whatever you want to say in an SMS. And the fun part is, so this one I sent out, and then this one I sent via SMS back. So what I did is on my phone, basically just replied on the SMS, and it came back to me over APRS this way. So it works really well. It's very simple.
That's cool.
Yeah. Now in PinPoint, there's actually under the Tools menu, there is Send SMS right there. You don't have to even remember these gateways or anything like that. There's Send SMS, Send Gateway, Send Email. Because you can also send an email. You just basically send it to the email to gateway as the destination call sign. And then the first item in the message should be the recipient's email address. So very simple, right? And then whatever you want. And then I get it into my regular email client, and this is what I sent. And it says do not reply. So yeah, sending back doesn't work. But you can send a quick email like, hey, I'm home in 10 minutes, whatever.
Yeah, they've got to do that to keep the spam out.
Exactly. And they're still referring to find you. That's very interesting to me. So, best practices. When you set up your path, in other words, how far do you want to get rebroadcasted? You want to make sure that for a fill-in digi, you use just wide 1. And for an area digi, you want to use wide 2. And I'll show you in a minute what that means. And then a wide 3 digi is a wide area digi. So that's like a digi sitting on top of a mountaintop listening for wide 3 packets. So if you address a wide 3 digipeater, it will go, oh, it's talking to me, and then rebroadcast it over a huge area. So in a regular in-town, like we are right now, situation, you only need 1 hop, maybe 2. So that's why I'll show you in a second here what that comes down to. So how does that work? Wide x dash y. The x determines what kind of digi you're looking for. So the fill-in digi, so temporary, usually not very, doesn't broadcast very wide. The area digi, usually a fixed station, in-town coverage, or the one that sits on a mountaintop, has huge range. And then this counts down the number of hops. For instance, wide 3-3 is 3 hops. So with every hop, the first time that digipeater receives it is wide 3-3. It takes the last 3 and reduces it by 1. It becomes wide 3-2 and sends it back out. Another wide 3 digipeater receives it, sees, oh, wide 3-2. It reduces that 2 by 1, so it's wide 3-1, and sends it back out. And there's another one that picks it up, looks at it, wide 3-1. I'm going to send it out one more time, that's it. And then so it reduces the wide 3-1 to just wide 3. No more hops. So other digis will see it, but will ignore it because it's out of hops. So that's why you want to be careful, because you can easily saturate a network.
And this was a solution that was developed in the 90s because there were stations that said, well, I want to be digied everywhere. And they were literally saturating the frequency.
Yeah, because they get digipeated everywhere, because...
Yeah, I remember seeing, I think it was in QST magazine years ago, they had an example where they were showing on UI View,
yeah.
a station that was in Georgia being received in New York City.
Hop, 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 hop.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And all it did was it effectively just consumed their time.
Yep, exactly. So prevent network saturation. Your packet path should be wide 1-1, comma, wide 2-1. So it's really 1 fill-in digi-hop, 1 area digi-hop at most, for mobile use in urban settings. So 2 hops max.
So the wide one, so there's 2 different systems. There's wide 1 and
Wide 1-1,
3.
whoever's listening to that, that's usually fill-in digis. Wide 2 are usually the bigger digis that are a little bit more range.
So is there wide 3s around here at all?
Yeah, there are. They're very high up usually. They have huge range.
But you wouldn't even hit that unless you set that.
There's no need to in town.
Right. But then you have to set that in if you want to use that.
If you want to use it. If you're rural, yeah, then you might want to. So for instance, that's why, if you are a fixed station, wide 2-1, more than enough, 1 hop. But if you're
east side of town, you're not going to get away from the ARP. He's going to pick you up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now if you're Kelly, you're out a little bit further out.
He still picks me up.
Still picks. Okay.
And if they don't, the North Central Fire Protection
That's true.
picks you up.
Right.
So you set it to, when you set it to go to wide 1-1, wide 2-1, or wide 2-2, why not?
Wide 1-1, wide 2-1, because we really only want 1 hop out of the area digi. We don't want 2. We want to cut down on the traffic. Right, just 1
We're
hop.
still going to be digi twice.
It's just going to be digi twice if you.
And the 2s.
Yeah. So you want to cut down. Yeah.
Is there such thing as wide 1-2 or not?
No, because you can never be higher than the first number.
First number.
So Frank, when I'm way the hell out of town, would I make it wide 2-2?
Yeah. Yeah, or even wide 3-1 or something like that.
I
BFE
use
nowhere.
wide 2-2 when I'm driving cross country.
Yeah. But when you're in town, no.
Because I didn't know that wide 3 was even around. And
I never
think
heard
that
of
they're
wide
far
3.
fewer.
Yeah, that's something new.
Beacon frequency. If you can use smart beaconing, if your TNC has that option, smart beaconing means I'm only going to beacon, not more than once every 10 minutes. But if I change direction by more than 35 degrees, the GPS will tell me that. Then I'm going to beacon again because I'm now changing direction. PinPoint does full smart beaconing, and you can fully configure it yourself. But the Anytones don't have it. All they have is fixed interval. And if you have a fixed interval, then for a static station, Wayne, 20 to 30 minutes, once every 20 to 30 minutes is enough. For weather,
Wayne set for, see?
what's that?
What's Wayne set for?
Less than 20 minutes.
That is the correct answer. I mean, when you connect to your radio, the first packet you will see will be from Wayne. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, I love Wayne to death, I really do. But it's a little frequent.
If you haven't used PinPoint with one of your radios before, with a D700, D710, such and so forth, what's not immediately obvious, but you eventually figure out, is that you actually use those radios in packet mode, and you do not use them in APRS mode. You think, I'm doing APRS, and I'm using PinPoint, why wouldn't I do that?
Shouldn't it be in APRS mode? No.
But you actually just turn on the packet TNC in those radios.
So you can access it.
The APRS intelligence.
Yeah. On the D700, when you set it to packet mode, now you can actually talk to the TNC inside of the radio through the serial port. When it's in APRS mode, it's fully self-contained. It does its own digipeating and beaconing and everything else. And the TNC in the car, right? Exactly.
Is that
So
same for D74?
I think the D74 only has a KISS TNC, so I'd have to play with it. I don't know.
If you want one to play with,
I would love to. Yeah, maybe we can get together sometime and just. Cool. Should you set up an iGate? It's fun, but if your neighbor already has an iGate, there's really no point for you to set up an iGate. So if there's iGates right around you, there's no point.
Is Wayne an iGate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's digipeater and iGate. And PinPoint, like I said, is a receive-only iGate, so it only passes things onto the internet. It does not broadcast them back out. Make sure, I got to speed up a little bit. Pick the right things. TNC2 commands. This is maybe a little bit too much detail, but this is basically the commands that if you select the Kenwood D710, these are actually the commands that PinPoint will send to it to set it in the right mode. So you can see these are regular readable commands. And the TNC will do certain things and say, oh, okay, yeah, I know what to do now. That's why a TNC2 TNC is nice, because you can program it to do certain things for you. Whereas a KISS TNC, stupid, doesn't know anything.
So that's what it sends to the D710 then?
Yeah, this is what it sends when it starts up. And you can actually, in this text file, you can find this text file. You can actually set your own parameters if you want to. But this is all that's needed. So.
So that was to on, so it said digi on, did you say? Go back.
Yeah. So basically what it does, digipeat digi. So in digi, what that means is that PinPoint will actually replace this with on or off based on how you set it in PinPoint. If you set digipeat on, then it will actually replace this little keyword here with on, so that the TNC knows, oh, I got a digipeat.
So in other words, if I got in a set of 10, if I got digi on, then it will do that.
It'll do it. Yeah, that's the nice thing about these TNC2 TNCs is they can fully digipeat and everything, and PinPoint doesn't have to know anything about it because it does it on its own.
So should I have digipeat on or off then if I'm using PinPoint with 710?
It's up to you.
Up to me.
If you want to digi, sure.
Which is poker run you do.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you set it with PinPoint, if you put it on, it'll do it.
Yeah, you don't even need PinPoint. You can just do it from your computer. Just tell it to digipeat. PinPoint doesn't do anything. It just turns it on. That's all it does.
That's what I mean, but it'll turn it on if I have
But
it.
PinPoint doesn't do anything. You can shut PinPoint down. It'll still digipeat. So that's the nice thing about these smart TNCs. I would like to do this, but I would like to continue, keep going for a little bit, and maybe get back to it in a bit. So who uses PinPoint? Anybody know this building?
No, never seen it.
So it's kind of cool. So they actually have it running at W1AW, which is the ARRL headquarters in Connecticut. What is the city name?
Newton.
No, that's it. And they actually have it running. They reached out to me one day and it's like, hey, we got it running, and it's like, thanks for the support, and like, that's kind of cool. So I asked them to take a picture of it running at W1AW. I was hoping I'd have to shack of the background or something, but this is what he sent me. That's fine. He's the station manager, so Joe Garcia. This is actually an overview of who is using PinPoint now. And you can tell here that it goes to about 10,000 people here, from 1 to 10,000. There's not a lot of countries where it hasn't been downloaded and used.
That's cool.
It's pretty cool, huh? And so yeah, even here in the no, sorry, just escaped my mind. Between Iceland and and top of Scotland. Sorry?
Orkneys?
Orkneys, yes, but there's another island group there. Anyway,
Faroes.
that's it. Faroe Islands, thank you. They're even emailing me from there. I'm like, what are you using it for there? Like, well, we're just playing around with it. And
I noticed Belarus is empty.
yeah. However, Ukraine is, they're using it. So they're using it in Ukraine. I hope they're using it for good purposes.
They're putting trackers on.
I hope so. I don't know. But it's kind of cool to see this, and China seems to have a few, more than most. And so anyway. PinPoint was also written up in QST of September 2018 by Steve Ford, which is really, really cool. He reached out to me and wanted to...
Improved it considerably since then, too.
Yeah, since then, yeah, absolutely. So that was kind of cool.
Then you're officially eclectic.
Yeah, exactly. That's a different column, I think, but yeah. This was an interesting path, NA1SS. Somebody shared this with me. This is not me running it, this is somebody else running it. And you can see that it actually was digipeated by the International Space Station, because this is the International Space Station call sign. And when the path has an asterisk, it means that is the last station that touched it. So it was repeated by the International Space Station. So pretty cool. So digital APRS from DMR, it is only supported on the Brandmeister network. So if you don't know what the Brandmeister network is, I highly recommend taking a look at it. If you have a DMR radio, you probably do know what it is. And their website is brandmeister.network. Not .com, .network. So, oops. Don't enable it on Rocky Mountain Ham's DMR network, because there's no support for it. And you'll get some nasty emails or whatever from the people at Rocky Mountain Ham. Because how does it work? Well, your radio actually sends an SMS message with APRS data to a specific talk group, and it sends it to talk group 310.999 as an SMS, and that is specific to the US, because other countries use different talk groups. So it depends on what master server you're on, what talk group you should use for APRS. So in the US, it's this talk group, and there's a Brandmeister server listening to that talk group, and it basically takes that information in the SMS and then does some data crunching and then sends it on to APRS IS. It actually sends it on to APRS.FI, because that guy that built so much infrastructure, he's actually an integral part of APRS IS.
So on our Brandmeister reviews, you could use it.
You could, however. This is the item here that I want to talk about a little bit. So you can set up digital APRS and Brandmeister for anytime radios. Just take a look at this PDF. It'll walk you right through it. It's really simple to do. Your call sign, your SSID, your icon, your text comment, and the interval to APRS IS are not defined on your radio. They're defined on your Brandmeister account under self-care. So if you go to self-care, you actually see the brand you can set, your APRS interval, the icon, the call sign, and then whatever text you want to have show up. This is kind of cool, text capture. This actually detects whether your radio is online, and if your radio is not online, it will hold messages for you until you are online and then send them to you. So that's kind of cool. So all this is set up on your Brandmeister account, not on your radio. So it can be used for the bidirectional messaging as well, and there's a way to do that. The question is of legality, because anytime you send out a position report on DMR, it does not include your call sign because it is set up, your call sign is set up on your Brandmeister account. It's not set up on your radio. So there's nothing identifying your transmission with your call sign. And the FCC doesn't like that. It only has your radio ID, your DMR ID.
It's too much trouble to look it up.
Yes, but
So
it's not your call sign.
it's not your call sign. FCC says. So, should we use it? Probably not. All right.
Can you put your call sign in the comments?
Yes, but that's on Brandmeister, and that only gets sent to APRS IS over the internet. So the piece where it counts over RF, it doesn't have your call sign. APRS and DMR hotspots in Brandmeister. On Pi-Star, you can actually have Brandmeister plot the location of your hotspot, if you have a hotspot, on APRS FI as well. If you don't want it to do that, you can go into your settings for your hotspot, and under priority message, you put, sorry, it's a little hard to read, you put no APRS. If you put no APRS, then Brandmeister will not send on the APRS information to the APRS FI network. There's,
Leave it blank.
sorry?
You leave it blank if you want.
If you leave it blank, it will do it. And of course, if you put in the latitude and longitude and things like that. All right. So it's 9 o'clock. Does everybody have to leave, or do you have 5 minutes to see PinPoint real quick?
Not at the library.
You are on the clock.
I am on the clock.
We're not at the library, so we don't have to do that.
You know my 5 minutes. It's never 5 minutes. All right. So if you go to my website, which is pinpointaprs.com, and there's a download section, you can basically download the software right here. And once you've done that and you've unzipped the file and installed it, then you can start PinPoint. And there's a quick start guide included as well as PDF. I need to update it, unfortunately, because I've added a lot of stuff and it's not in the quick start. However, what I need to do is to show you PinPoint. First, it shows up with the license agreement, and nobody reads that, right? Hit accept. And then it's going to tell you that you need to at least set up your call sign. So it's going to come up with N0 call, which you want to replace with your real call sign. And then the path it's going to suggest is typically okay for what you have. And then the icon can be anything you want. I'm going to set it to a little house here. Oops. And if you want APRS to digipeat, if you have a TNC2 TNC, a smart one, you can enable digipeating by just turning this on. And that is what that file that I was showing you earlier, it basically sends to the TNC digipeat on. That's all it does. So, and then beaconing, enable beaconing, you can set it for at least 30 minutes or a minimum of every 3 miles. For instance, if I'm going down the road and I want to beacon every 3 miles, or when my heading changes more than 35 degrees, beacon again. So that's the smart beaconing, and you can customize this yourself. Beacon my altitude, beacon my course and speed, maximum speed reported via radio.
So, does this override what you programmed into 710 for those things?
It does. Actually, the beaconing is done by PinPoint, not by the 710.
Okay, so it's done by PinPoint.
This is where you set up your TNC. There's a whole list of them. If you have a KISS TNC, it's either a serial or a network KISS TNC. You can also do it over Ethernet. And just set up the parameters as needed. If you have a GPS like this one or the little cube or something like that, you can actually have it bring in the position so you know where you are all the time.
Now, 710, the old 7, when you have the GPS unit on the back, it'll pick that up?
No. This is really stupid of the Kenwood engineers. When they built the GPS into the control head of the D710, they made it inaccessible to the TNC port when you're running it in packet mode, which is how PinPoint or any software would use that TNC to do APRS. So you still need an external GPS, even though you have one inside the control head.
How about the one that you mount outside? Like
That's fine.
710?
That will work.
Even though it goes into, that'll work.
That'll work.
So the A model will work, but the G it won't, what you're saying?
You still need a GPS for the G model.
Even though it's got one A.
Yeah, it's a firmware thing. I don't know why they did it that way.
So it's interesting with the A model, it worked.
Yeah.
Because you already got one.
Yeah.
But if you're doing this from home, it's gonna be a static agent.
Right.
So it doesn't need a
Nope. And I'll show you how to set your own position without a GPS.
So Frank, question. So if I'm doing poker runs and I hook PinPoint into my D710 and I send it all these commands, can I first copy down the parameters that are in the D710, store them in a file, and then read them back when I'm done?
Yeah, you could. Yeah, you could. You could actually have it list. There's a command for it. And I think it. Stat, is that it?
Stat L lists
all your commands.
Ah.
So just capture it. Should be good. On the mapping side, there's a whole bunch of maps that are available. You can even have satellite maps, like I'll show you here in a second. You can change real time. There's a bunch of other settings that are very interesting, but we don't have to go through right now. APRS IS. This is enable RF to IS iGate when connected. That's when you need your passcode required for TX. Packet deduping, that's what I was talking about, where if it gets packets from multiple sources, it just sticks its fingers in his ear and just ignores them for 30 seconds if it's the same call sign. Usually 30 seconds is enough. And then APRS IS server, NOAM, that's how I was talking about North America. Server UDP port is standard, don't worry about that. You can set your range to a little bit more than that. You can set it to 50 miles if you want. You can have custom filters as well. If you click on the question mark, it'll actually take you to the filter page. You can actually set up your own filters in PinPoint. And then once you're done, you click on OK, and it actually loads everything. And then this is how the first screen looks. So there's nothing going on right now. What I can do immediately is connect APRS IS, and you can see down here that it is actually connecting to a server called T2EDM. If I click on that link, I'll actually go to that server, and I can actually see what's going on that server, and I see I'm actually listed right there. See that? And I didn't put my passcode in, so it says verified, no. So if I try to write to that APRS IS server, it says you can't. So you have to need your passcode for that. So get your XOR binary math ready for that. No, just kidding. Just use the online link.
Is there a computer that will do that program?
Yes. There's a link in the presentation how you can do that. So you can see stuff is already coming in. And you can just, I can actually send a message right now. I want to send an SMS, and Barry, can I send you a number, a message? 303 908 9533. This is a test. So when I send that, it actually is going out. Oh, that's right. I need to be connected with a passcode. I can't write to APRS IS. So I gotta change that real quick.
So to enable those two-way communications, you have to have the passcode.
You have to have the passcode if you want to be able to write to APRS IS. So I go back into options, 21751. It never changes.
You gotta remember what it is.
Unless you change your call sign.
Oops.
That's kind of the point.
All right, I'm reconnected to the same server. Send SMS. Sorry, Perry, I'm going to ask you again.
303 908 9533.
All right, so that went out. and you can actually see it. And you can actually see that the gateway actually acknowledged it, that it sent it. And then you can reply back, Barry, if you'd like.
Was your ding you mean you received the message, Barry?
Yep, you got it.
Yes. Yes, Dick.
That's what I thought.
And Barry just sent me a message back, and there it is. Copy, thanks. See, came right back. And this works over RF and APRS IS. So there's ways to send an email, same way, send message via the WinLink gateway. Use that reference in the presentation to figure out how to do that. But yeah, this is really quick and dirty what I've got for tonight. Any questions, anything that I can?
Your webpage has a wiki?
It has, so if you download the file, if you, let's see, this is the PinPoint, inside the file there's a quick start guide.
Okay.
And that will take you through real quick how to do basically everything. I do need to update it because I just added a bunch of stuff that is not in the quick start yet, but just like developers hate writing documentation, that's me.
They hire people to do that.
Any other questions? Anything I can answer?
These little USB GPS pucks are pretty easily available.
Yeah.
Look for U-blocks,
Yeah.
UBLOX.
Yep.
The older ones are U-block 7. They actually make a little dongle that's like a USB thumb drive for as little as like 12 or 15 bucks. I got a U-blocks 8 that was a whole 40 bucks. But this thing actually picks up a 3D fix from my basement. So this thing works pretty well. And it's on a 6-foot cable, so you can put it near a window or something instead of just being stuck to the side of your machine.
Yep. And the modern GPS chips will pick up from our own US-based GPS system, GLONASS, which is the Russian one, and then there's the Chinese one, but I don't know if that's operational yet. But the modern chips actually can pick up from any of them, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, that has
Pick up VDS as well.
it has a USB connector, and that's how it's powered, but it shows up as a serial port. So that's kind of nice. In PinPoint, you just select the serial port and it works. So
And it sends NMEA
yeah,
sentences.
yeah, exactly. So anybody else have anything for show and tell that's interesting or?
So on my, so I have an old D700 that I keep in the car,
Yeah.
and I took a U-blocks chip and made my own GPS receiver.
Yep.
And then I set the GPS data for pass-through, and it goes right into PinPoint.
Yeah, exactly. And
It
that's
works great.
yeah, that's the really nice thing about the D700 and the D710. If you have an external GPS, you can actually tell it to pass through, and in packet mode, it will also send the GPS data that it receives from that little unit in the packet stream, so that PinPoint knows, oh, where you are located. Unfortunately, but that's the firmware issue I was referring to with the D710G version, the AG, that has a built-in GPS. You can't do that. The firmware doesn't support it. Stupid. Anything else? Did I reach my objective? In other words, did I teach each and everyone something? All right. Thanks for being here.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, of
Great
course.
job.
Thank you.
We really
Appreciate it.
appreciate it.